Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders, joined as always by Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. And today we're going to kind of talk about the top of the first round leading up to that Steelers pick at number 24 and talk about, we're not going to sit here and do a pick-by-pick mock draft, but we're going to talk about what we think is going to happen and maybe what things you should be looking for on Thursday night that are going to impact the Steelers before their pick comes up. And so that's kind of the premise here. And, it's been a tough mock draft season. We were just talking about this before we started for the Steelers because they do have so many needs. And so, you really could see them go a number of different ways. I mean, we talked yesterday. We feel like Najee Harris is sort of coalescing as the probable pick, if not maybe a favorite. And we also certainly feel strongly about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, linebacker from Notre Dame, and feel that trading down is an option. But when it comes to what is going to make that decision for Kevin Colbert, and the way he described it yesterday is a little bit simplistic for me, but basically he just said, hey, we rank our guys, and the only decision is, do we trade up, do we trade down, or we pick the guy that's at the top of the board? I think it's a little more complicated than that. But how is this going to play out for the Steelers? Is Najee Harris and will JOK be there for them at 24? And so we're going to try to answer that question by kind of going down through the draft and looking at some of the inflection points as to where things could go one way or another. But Nick, I just want to get quickly your thoughts on maybe what Colbert said yesterday about the way they draft and how that's going to kind of inform what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I thought the real interesting thing was when he talked about that, he said it's not necessarily in the order we have them on our evaluation board. So they could have a higher grade on, say, Devonta Smith than Najee Harris, but they could have Najee Harris above Devonta Smith because, and this is where I think need comes into it, right? I think this is where the complicated thing comes in. Now, I truly do think they just sit there and wait. They don't move much. They don't do much. The only time they really move up is when they're it's a weak class, 2019 when they went up for Bush. There was no one outside of White and Bush, right? That's a different case. But I think they do just sit there. But I think it's in those discussions where we have to talk about where they talk about, the need versus kind of value, pure talent. So I feel like we kind of look at that, and that's where you'll think, well, how did Artie Burns get up that high? And first of all, that scares me. He said they haven't done it in 12 years, which means they actually had Artie Burns ranked that high on their board, which is worrying. And they also had Terrell Edmonds above Lamar Jackson, which is another thing, which is probably where that need king came in. It wouldn't surprise me if they had Lamar above him. You know what I mean? That's where the complicated stuff. I think it's a sound process. I just want to know how they weigh need versus pure talent. What goes into that? And Colbert keeps saying they draft for BPA, but you kind of look at what they've done over the years, and they end up drafting for need.
Every team drafts for need. I've never seen a single team just sit there and be like, well, we have Tom Brady, but the best player on the board is a quarterback, so we're going to smash that quarterback. It's a BS thing that every GM says, and none of them actually do. No team actually drafts best player available all the time. Some of them do it more than others, but need is absolutely a big part of the equation.
Absolutely. And I would want to know how that factors in. But for the Steelers, it's absolutely a huge need. You end up seeing them address a big need almost every year. Edmonds safety was the big need that year. Shazier, Bush, obviously. Watt. Last year was a little bit different. I think they did go BPA last year with Claypool. Now, wide receiver was a need, but they had multiple different directions they could have gone with that. The way Tomlin described that pick, they ran the card in on Claypool. They barely even didn't Claypool say they didn't even talk to him? They just that was interesting. They didn't even talk to Chase Claypool. It's kind of what they did with Juju too. They didn't even talk to Juju and they just ran it in. I think they do go BPA. Juju was a BPA pick, I think. I think Claypool was a BPA pick. But I don't know when the last time, what was the last BPA pick in round one? DeCastro, who also happened to be a need.
Yeah,
or Dupree, maybe. I mean, Dupree was
honestly, it didn't turn out that way. But Jarvis Jones, outside linebacker, wasn't their top need that year. Obviously didn't turn out very well, but that was in 13. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure it was their top need in 15 either when they took Bud. That might be the one that really stands out is when they took Bud Dupree, and that was an interesting bottom of that first round. There, I mean, he's kind of the best guy out of the guys that one ended up. I guess Landon Collins was the other player that they kind of had a need for that they could have taken there, but I mean that there was not a lot of talent there to be had in the end of that first round, so that was kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, so I don't know. They don't do it very often. That's in the first round at least. So they got to wait need somehow.
Yeah. So given that, we still think, Harris, JOK are kind of the two guys that we're looking at. I mean, there are others certainly, Tevin Jenkins and who knows who falls. But let's take a look at this draft, kind of starting at the top. And I think pretty clearly that the quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3. Now, no one's really sure who the third quarterback is. But then after that, I don't know. How do you see this draft falling? I think the wide receivers, Chase and Waddle and Smith will certainly all be gone before we get to, say, 15. I think the top two corners, Surtain and Horn, will probably be, as well as Kyle Pitts and probably Penny Sewell. Is that pretty much where you are with maybe the top 10 to 15 picks?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's probably Lawrence, Wilson, Jones or Lance, whichever of the two. We got that report. I'm leaning it's Mac Jones actually at this point. I think they're going to take Mac Jones. I think Pitt's probably to Atlanta or Lance, whichever one of those two. Miami, I think, is the lock for Chase at this point. I don't even think it's a debate anymore. I think they have their guy.
Do the Bengals take Sewell at 5 or a wide receiver? It could be.
I think they take Chase. I do.
Okay.
Miami, I think, probably ends up either trading out of that pick or getting Devonta Smith. Detroit could take Justin Fields here, or they could trade out. The Patriots, I think, are going to trade up with either Miami or perhaps Carolina here at 8.
Denver's also a trade down option at 9.
Denver could also trade up the board for a quarterback as well, so they're certainly part of that whole field. Now Carolina could take one of the corners. Dallas is certainly going to take a corner. The Giants probably take someone like Slater, right? I think I would. Slater and Sewell, we haven't mentioned them. They're going to go somewhere in here. Detroit, Carolina, Denver, Dallas, Giants, Chargers, all the way down Minnesota. Yeah. They all could take.
So I think where Slater goes starts to inform the process of how this impacts the Steelers, because I think Slater and I guess you can include Christian Darrisaw and Elijah Vera Tucker. But listen, these are 3 linemen that I think the Steelers would probably take if they fell to them, that I don't think are likely to fall to them. But how they go is really, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that all 3 of those guys are top 15 picks. They also could all be still on the board when the Patriots pick at 15. It doesn't seem like there's a team, to me anyway, especially if the Bengals don't take Sewell, what you're saying, that is just like, oh my God, we have to get a tackle in there. Is there? Maybe LA?
Yeah, the Chargers. I think the Giants are like, oh my God, we need a guard. But like
yeah, but you don't take a guard at number 11.
Yeah, but also they need edge rusher help. And there's like, maybe this is where a first edge rusher comes out of the world, like a Kwity Paye, someone like that. They could go one of the receivers with Waddle, Smith, if they're there. Philly could go probably corner, I think, but they could also go receiver.
I feel like J.C. Horn is a really good fit for the Eagles there, and I've seen him there a good bit.
It kind of depends on how Horn and Surtain work out. And again, who trades up? I think Minnesota's probably going to go O-line. I think that's where Vera Tucker could land. I also think they could go Darrisaw. Slater, if he's there, I think is a slam dunk for them. I think New England's going to trade up for Fields. I think that's where Justin Fields ultimately lands. I think he's going to be a New England Patriot, which pains me to say a lot, but I think that's where he's going to end up, which means you're probably having one of my – okay, so here's a scenario, and this is where we're going to talk about this. This is where we could get into dangerous territory for Pittsburgh. Miami trades back to 15. New England moves up for Fields. This is where we can get into Najee Harris territory. 15 is not too early.
And that's in Miami with having picks at 15 and 18 then. Especially, you could see them using one of them on Najee Harris.
Absolutely. And then also they do have an O-line need. Austin Jackson wasn't great. Robert Hunt's probably a better guard than tackle. So we could see someone like a Darisaw come off the board.
So the Dolphins can come in at 16 and go Darisaw Harris in 2 picks and just really mess up the Steelers.
Exactly. And they could. So
and in between them, the Raiders at 17 could very easily take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yep.
So we could very easily see these guys that we like, we would kind of hope the Steelers would have there going off the board in these 16, 17, 18 kind of picks.
Exactly. And like looking at this, Arizona is a team that could take one of the top corners outside.
They also need a lineman help too. I think Vera Tucker is an option there as well.
Yep. I also think Zaven Collins is an option here for them. Now I'm only reporting that because Pauline said that was a reported interest. If the 2 top corners are off the board, apparently they really like Zaven Collins, and that's obviously a Steelers linked guy as well. So keep an eye on that connection. I think Vegas, also, we haven't really talked about him a lot, but I think Vegas outside of JOK, and we haven't mentioned Micah Parsons. If Parsons is falling down the board, and we have heard that, I think the Raiders are going to take Parsons, which could allow JOK to slip. And
there isn't a team, maybe the Titans at 22. The Jets have needs everywhere, so it's very hard to predict what's going to happen right above the Steelers. But if JOK gets past the Raiders, I start to like his chances of being there at 24 a little bit more. Would you agree with that?
I do. Miami could take him.
I guess. I mean, yeah.
Miami has a really good spot at 18 because they can essentially go best player available. And JOK might be that guy. Obviously, we have to feel how that kind of works out. Najee could be their guy. Washington, I think, is a threat for JOK for sure. If there's no quarterback there, and obviously they need a quarterback. There's no quarterback there. They really have a few options. They could add to the receiving core and add someone like Rashad Bateman. They could attack the O-line perhaps and maybe go like Tevin Jenkins there. That's really where I feel like Jenkins's first option to come off the board would be. They could and this is where maybe a Darisaw or someone like a Vera Tucker falling down could go. Something like that. But JOK, they have that's not a great linebacking core.
Yeah, John Bostic is, I believe. I mean, and I think he's their starting middle linebacker right now.
Yeah, so JOK, I think, would fit into that role. And I think they're a threat to JOK. Because again, I'm just thinking about it, like, who else would they take? Unless they really want a receiver. I
think they should be trying to trade up for a quarterback, but we'll see if they're able to do that.
Exactly. I think they will try to trade up for a quarterback, but again, there's no guarantee they will.
They do need receiver. They have really no one beyond Terry McLaurin. I mean, I guess they like Cam Sims and Antonio Gandy Golden, guys like that, but I mean, they're not like a player like Rashad Bateman would be, or like, maybe if one of the top guys falls down. I think the receivers will all go at the top. Terrace Marshall will probably be there. Rondell Moore. I mean, that's maybe more of a reach, but I mean, that's an interesting call there. What about the Bears at 20? I mean, they're another team that should probably be trading up for a quarterback, but only so many are going to be able to. What are their needs other than quarterback? And I think that's another place you could see Tevin Jenkins going.
Yeah, I think you could see Jenkins, Leatherwood, Cosme. I could see a ton of tackles go off the board there. Darisaw, again, this is why I just don't see how Darisaw makes it to 24. There's so many tackle needy teams that you would feel like, well, they would take Darisaw because he's got, the ability there to just be phenomenal. I can't see him falling there. Also, corner. This is another place. Greg Newsome has been a name that's been linked to the Steelers a little bit. Could go off the board here.
I think Greg Newsome going to Chicago is a good thing for the Steelers because I'm not sure that he's really a realistic option for them, but that's a guy. I don't think they'd draft him anyway. So him going 4 picks ahead of time, I think that'd be a good call.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate it.
And
Also,
Chicago
I will
picking a
say,
Northwestern guy is very, very like I in a pandemic year, especially like that seems like that could happen.
yeah, exactly. And I also will say the surprise pick of the first round, we've seen the Bears do some surprising things. It
Not in a
could,
good way.
like not in a good way, yeah, but it could be a potential landing spot for Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah, that's true. I think that'd take Newsome ahead of Samuel, but we'll see. Yes.
Yeah, I mean they need a boundary corner, and I mean I think Samuel can do that, but he's probably more of a slot guy. So
Yeah, that's why I think Newsome would be the guy. They also probably need some help on the defensive line, but it is just such a poor
it's an awful
line
D-line
class
class.
that,
Awful.
that I just don't see. I don't see how they can fill that need with that pick 20. I mean, I guess maybe they could trade back and target a Barmore.
Yeah,
But that's kind of all I see happening there. Let's move to the Colts at 21. I've seen Cosme linked to them. I've seen a bunch of other players there.
I've seen guys like
They're,
Basham.
they're
Boogie
another
Basham.
they're another tackle possible team, right?
Yep. I've seen Boogie Basham recently linked to them. Maybe they go edge. They have a significant needed edge rusher. But yeah, tackle. And the two tackles when you kind of I don't know why I know the Colts kind of have specific things that they look for in their positions. Kind of like how the Steelers do, So there's a Steelers running back, there's a Steelers edge rusher. You kind of know what the Steelers want in these players. The Colts Chris Ballard has this kind of type at tackle, and the two types that are like Darisaw and Leatherwood. So this is a Leatherwood landing spot, I think, and a Darisaw landing spot. Cosme doesn't really fit what they look for because he doesn't have the length. But Leatherwood, I think, could definitely come off the board here. I also think, though, I think they're a great option to trade back. And we've talked about recent trade back options. Green Bay has talked about maybe coming up for a receiver like a Rashad Bateman. Buffalo's talked. We had the report yesterday. Buffalo wants to come up for Travis Etienne. I think this is a possible spot to where Buffalo, if they want to leapfrog the Steelers, or obviously the Steelers, I think if they want to leapfrog the Jets, perhaps more so, this is where maybe they would go. I think that the Colts are a trade back option team.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think they're a good, like they're in a pretty solid best player available spot. Like they don't have any glaring needs. I mean, I think they're not that deep at receiver after Hilton and Pittman. I think they could be a fit for a Bateman or maybe a Kadarius Toney or a Terrace Marshall there. But the other person that I could see going there first, maybe the first time we talked about, is Trayvon Mori, the safety from TCU, probably the first safety off the board. I could see him going there as well.
Yeah, he's an option as well. I mean, they could also go corner. So this is another thing where Newsome can come with the board. Yasin hasn't been great for them.
Yeah.
Even after Xavier Rhodes kind of came back and had a resurgence year.
Yeah, they're not very deep at corner either. So that's I could definitely see DB being the way they lean there, especially if tackle is kind of picked over. Like if we have Vera Tucker and Darisaw and Jenkins even all off the board at that point.
Yeah, and exactly that. I mean, listen, if they like Leatherwood, maybe they take Leatherwood. But I think they're a strong trade back team or edge. And I don't think this, we've talked about this. We don't really think the Steelers are in play for edge rushers here at 24. So I don't think it really affects them. And I think actually more edge rushers going off the board before 24 actually helps them. So this is something the Dolphins could also take an edge rusher when we didn't really mention that they need edge rushing help. So an Ojulari, a Pay, really anyone, Owe, anyone like that could definitely come off the board before the Steelers. And that would obviously allow guys like the Steelers to fall down the board further.
Now we have the Titans at 22. I've seen them linked to some edges, which I've thought is interesting since they have two of the Steelers from last year. But do they still need another one? And what else do the Titans need there at 22?
I think they need an edge, but not round one edge. I think they just need a depth edge, right? Like you're not taking a depth guy. I think Harold Landry's fine. I think Bud Dupree's obviously there. Ola is there now as well, but they do need another guy there. So I think they'll draft one in the mid rounds. I think their receiver room is dire right now. It's AJ Brown and no one, essentially. I think it's Josh Reynolds. I think that's their wide receiver right now. Not great. So Bateman, Kadarius Toney. We've seen Elijah Moore get some first round hype in recent days. Maybe he slips in here. They need a corner bad as well. They released Dory Jackson and Malcolm Butler, Greg Newsome, Asante Samuel Jr. perhaps again. If he, I do wonder if Asante Samuel Jr. is one of those guys that maybe the league's a little higher on than the media, and he's in play at these spots. So do want to mention his name. Caleb Farley as well, depending on how that medical situation works out.
Yeah, that
They're
would
also
be really good fit for Farley.
Yeah, I love the fit for Farley. I love that fit for him. I also say I think they're a tackle team. After cutting Isaiah Wilson, he kind of busted out of the league already. I think they could take a Tevin Jenkins, a Leatherwood, a Cosme, someone like that. And Eichenberg, I think, is an interest. I think Eichenberg.
And they're pretty set at left tackle with Luan, so it's just a right tackle guy for them. So that kind of makes it a little easier for them to take one of those guys that I think people are saying, well, the Steelers, maybe like a Cosme or a Leatherwood, where it's like, well, is he a left tackle in the NFL? I think the Titans don't have that. They don't have that pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And they could take someone like that. And I think Liam Eichenberg is getting some hype around there as well, so he could go off the board here. The Titans definitely have some overlap with the Steelers. It is a possible landing spot for JOK.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, they have Rashawn Evans, but I'm not sure who their other inside linebacker is.
They brought back Jayon Brown, so Brown should be there again. But again, he's not on a multi-year deal, and Rashawn Evans didn't have a good year last year. So it's possible, but I would say I don't think it's going to be their first priority. So they would have to take JOK would have to be the BPA, and they'd have to be, the corner spot, receivers, and in my opinion, even the tackles would probably have to be kind of bare at this point. So I don't view it as likely, but it is a distinct possibility.
And then after the Titans, we go down to the New York Jets, which I think is the most difficult part of trying to project who's going to be available for the Steelers, because it's just simpler to list the positions that the Jets don't need than it is to list the positions that the Jets do need.
So quarterback.
And the fact that this is they're going to get quarterback, right? So, they're going to get quarterback with two, but they could go almost any other direction here with pick 23.
Any direction. JOK they could go. I think he fits what a solid scheme linebacker is. But
they need a right tackle. They need wide receivers. They need corners.
They need edge rusher. They need they could use a safety.
They could
the safety
they're another JOK possible. I think that's a kind of a luxury pick for a team with like that many big, huge needs, but it's certainly plausible.
Well, I want to talk about luxury picks. We heard today, Tony Pauline, that they're interested in a running back at 23. And they're very high on Najee Harris.
Well, their best running back is who?
LaMichael Pirine, Tevin Coleman.
Tevin Coleman, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it's certainly a need. I'm not sure a team with that many needs should be taking. Listen, I don't think anybody should be taking a running back in the first round this year. That's just my opinion. I don't think any of these guys. I wouldn't be taking any of them in the first round, but I really don't think the Jets should be. But then again, you don't get to be the Jets without doing some things that a lot of people don't think you should be doing. I think that's the other really, really hard part about this team specifically is that, it's a whole new front office. So it's not like we have any draft history about these guys to think about like what they might do based on what they've done in the past, like we have some other teams.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if they do take Najee Harris, I think if we talked about with the Dolphins, if they, take Darisaw or another tackle, and then the tackles come off the board between like the Colts and the Titans, and then all of a sudden you get the other punch from Najee going off the board. I think this is where you can talk about the Steelers calling up Buffalo and saying, hey, still want ETN and getting out of 24. Like that's unless JOK is there, obviously. If JOK is there, they would take him, I think, in a heartbeat. But if he's gone, if the top tackle is JOK, there's really no corner, and Najee's off the board, I think that's when Colbert would start to think about getting out of 24. And I think they're a realistic threat to Najee Harris or Travis Etienne. So Etienne fits their scheme better, but I think Najee's a scheme diverse running back.
Is
So I
this
don't
the
know.
first place you can see ETN realistically going without a trade up scenario?
Yeah, that's the first place I can see ETN coming off the board. But again, it's going to be kind of play by ear. What do they want? I just it running back. Just yes, they have a huge need. It just seems so fickle for them to take a running back. I don't get it. Why wouldn't you fill out the rest of your team and then take the running back next year? Like you could take just one in the late rounds this year, or a
Yeah,
Michael
I
Carter in
guess.
round 3.
I mean, I think ETN is interesting because he's a player that you can say, well, we're trying to give a young quarterback some weapons in the passing game, right? And he's if they don't like if they let's say that Bateman's off the board and maybe another guy like maybe Marshall and Tony are off the board as well, and they're like, well, this is too early for a Rondell Moore. This is still an offensive weapon. I can see ETN. I think Harris would be a really poor pick for them. Just because, I mean, what's he going to do? I mean, you saw what Lev Bell did there. Like, they're very similar type of players. Like, it's not going to work out real well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously new coaching staff with Saleh and the 49ers coming over, but man, Najee, they really like the report said that they think there's a big drop off after Najee, ETN, and Javonte Williams. I don't get why they wouldn't just wait until like what they have picked 30 something very early. I think it's like 30. They have picked 34. Why wouldn't they just take Javonte Williams at 34? Like he'll be there. I definitely think he'll be there. Like they could just literally wait.
Yeah,
Unless they like
talk
Najee
about
that much.
there's some edges here that are kind of in this like 20 to 30 range that we didn't talk about. Jalen Phillips, Jason Owe, Gregory Rousseau. We talked about Pay a little bit earlier, but I mean, Aziz Ojolari. It seems like there's good value for edge in the later part of the first round. Obviously, the Steelers, not a huge need, but if the Jets with picks everywhere, I mean, that could be an option for them too.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention guys like Osai, Tryon, a lot of guys coming up here for them that I think they could target. Jamin Davis has gotten that first round hype recently at linebacker too. Yeah, I have no idea how to feel how this edge class is going to work out. Peyton Turner is also there. He's gotten a little bit of a round 1 hype.
Yeah, now they're going to run a 3-4, right? Is that what I saw? So I don't even know who their edges are at the moment. Zuniga, I guess, is one.
Yeah, that would be one. They need a pass rush. Nice to see at least they have interior D line.
So if you want the Steelers to get Najee Harris, what should you be hoping to happen ahead of them?
Well, you should be hoping that there's a good run on tackles. You should be hoping that there's multiple corners that come off the board. You should be hoping that these edges do get taken a little earlier than you would think. Most importantly,
you got to hope Miami doesn't take him. Obviously,
yeah. I think the big things
is that the big threat to him falling to the Steelers is Miami.
Yes, I think you have to first of all hope that Miami is more focused on edge, linemen, something like that, rather than getting a guy like a Najee Harris, because they could very easily want to feel very comfortable and literally go Devonta Smith and then Najee Harris, and I don't think they'd be worse off for it. So it's very possible. You have to hope that they don't. They care more about their defense losing the pass rushing ability of a guy like Kyle Van Noy than they do about adding another weapon in the backfield for Tua. Because listen, I think Myles Gaskin is serviceable, so I don't think it's like they're dying for a running back. Like they could take one later. I think they could wait till 50 and take Michael Carter and be a-okay. But it depends on what they want in that running back. But you also have to hope that the Jets don't see Najee as, this elite receiving back and think, well, that's going to help Zach Wilson, and we need to get our young guy, probably the best receiving back in the class. Like, that's also something you have to hope. So that's how Najee Harris gets to 24. And we also mentioned this. You have to hope a team like Denver, a team like perhaps Miami again doesn't trade back significantly to like 19, 20, 15, because if a Denver trades back to 19, 20, I mean, that's a team that could take Najee Harris. Like, that's also something you have to hope for.
And Washington, Chicago, 1920, obviously would be very eager to get up to where Denver is if a quarterback happens to fall to them. What about with JOK? What are the stumbling blocks you see, or what do you see that needs to happen for him to get the Steelers? To me, it starts with Micah Parsons falling out of the top 10, top 15, which talent-wise, he certainly deserves to be in.
Exactly. I think it starts with Micah Parsons falling. And also, maybe those character concerns that we've heard about Micah Parsons are going to sway off teams, and they're going to go for receivers, for, other tackles, stuff like that. And Parsons ends up falling. The ideal spot, I don't think Parsons is going to get past the Raiders. He feels like a Raider, just straight up. I think if you have him fall all the way to 17, I think it's ideal. I think that's perfect because I think they're a threat for JOK, and I think they would take Parsons over JOK. That's what I believe. Second, I would hope that this recent hype wave of linebackers, the Zaven Collins top 20 hype, the Jamin Davis hype, is true, and that JOK somehow becomes the third or fourth linebacker off the board. And it could be true. Now, we don't know exactly if it's going to be true. Davis is getting mocked to teams like Washington. We've seen Zaven Collins get mocked around there a little bit as well. Dallas, when they've traded back, have gotten mocked to those two, or than they have to a JOK, right? If Dallas trades back, which we've heard they want to trade back, they could be a threat for JOK. They need a linebacker. But you kind of want to hope that's also going to happen. And especially, you would hope that the running, at this point, you want both ETN and Najee to go off the board in terms of the running backs. Like, 2 picks on running backs is going to help. You hope the receivers, maybe there's 5 receivers taken before 24. So you want to hope that it's Parsons, Collins, and Davis have more hype, and that, more importantly, teams just look at JOK as this kind of novelty guy rather than, even though he's BPA, they have better needs. And
I do think if you have like strong needs that aren't inside linebacker, it becomes difficult to justify that pick as like it is a bit of a luxury, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, who is the team that's willing to push their needs off and take BPA, which would be JOK? Because there are teams that need linebacker, but it's not the need. I personally think Washington's the biggest threat to JOK. That's what I think. He's everything Ron Rivera looks for in a linebacker. They drafted Shaq Thompson, who is similar to JOK when he came out of Washington. So they're the biggest threat, in my opinion. And that's you also need to watch New Orleans lurking in the background at 28 in a possible trade scenario. They need linebacker bad. So they're also a team like with the Colts we talked about. At 21, maybe they move up ahead of the Steelers, ahead of Jets. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think it's crazy far-fetched to see JOK there at 24. Like, just walking through it, I think it's possible. So, I think you just kind of got to hope, though, that the teams just view him. Maybe they're scared off by Isaiah Simmons last year. He didn't have a terrific rookie year in Arizona. Maybe they view him in a similar lane, and he somehow ends up falling to 24.
Well, I think that's a good discussion about what needs to happen for some specific guys to get to the Steelers at 24. We're going to continue this discussion tomorrow about how we think the draft is going to fall, how in the first round, and maybe we'll talk about some of these teams that might want to come up ahead of the Steelers, some of these teams the Steelers might want to trade back to, and some other scenarios. Tomorrow, if you have a comment or a question, something specific you want us to hit, we will leave a comment on the YouTube platform or on the website. We'll get to it tomorrow. Until then, thanks for watching Draft Talk. I'm Alan Saunders for Nick Farabaugh. Enjoy the rest of the content here at SteelersLive.com or at PittsburghSportsLive.com and SteelersNow.com. Make sure you click the subscribe button so you get all of our content right away as soon as it comes up. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for watching.